Welcome, Mihirman here. So today I'm bringing you something a bit different. I was building around Tapu Koko for Ubers, and I had a couple really good games while I was testing, so I thought I'd upload those. I tried to make this video yesterday, but then something came up, so I wanted to sort of remake it. I'll explain that later. But anyways, I like Tapu Koko and Ubers because Veltal is like the #1 most used mon in Ubers, I believe, and Tapu Koko is a really good check to that. So this was the original team I had, with Tapu Koko with Life Orb, because Tapu Koko is pretty weak. I had a Choice Banded Zacian with Psychic Fangs, because Eternatus is a little bit of a problem for this team. Sort of a mixed defenses Necrozma, a Skarmory, because I thought Zacian would be a bit of a problem. And I was also trying out Zamzameta, just, because I thought it'd be fun. I don't remember what spread I was using, but this was the moveset. And if you see a problem with this team, then you're smarter than I was. So, the problem with Zamzameta, of course, well, one of the many problems, is that it doesn't have reliable recovery, like Roost or Moonlight or something, so I thought, oh, I'll give it Rest Sleep Talk. And then I have my typical Focus Punch Palkia. So, the first replay is the first game I ever got with this team. And I'll bring that to you in a second. So this was the first game I played with this team that I just built, and we're playing this guy Shuriken, and he was number 10 on the ladder, and I was like, oh, this is a good game. And then I'm like, oh my god, I have this team that I just made, this is going to be awful. Threats on my opponent's team, my opponent has a Magnezone, and I have a Skarmory, and I have a Necrozma. So that's a bit of an issue. Also, Eternatus is also kind of a problem on my opponent's team, and if I lose my Necrozma, then my opponent's Zacian is a bit of a problem. So I lead with, I believe, Necrozma predicting Eternatus. So this Eternatus is a big problem, and I'm worried this thing has Black Sludge and is gonna not die. So I want to knock off its Black Sludge turn 1. So I go for knockoff, and my opponent switches in a Magnezone. So now I'm trapped. I don't have Earthquake, so there's nothing I could have really done. And I'm leftovers. So this Magnezone is actually a real problem for my team, even defensively, beyond just trapping, Skarm and Necrozma. My Tapu Koko can't really touch it. My Zacian doesn't have close combat, because I have Psychic Fangs, Wild Charge, Crunch, and Play Rough. And my Zamzameta isn't even very offensive. So this thing is a big problem for me. So the first thing I want to do is weaken this thing as much as possible. So it switches in, I go for knockoff, I see its leftovers get knocked off, and I'm like, okay, this is some body press Magnezone. So I'm just going to try and weaken this as much as I can. I know I have a couple turns before I get knocked out. So it goes for Magnet Rise in case I have Earthquake, but I don't have Earthquake. I continue to try to weaken it as much as I can, and at some point I decide, okay, I'm going to get Rocks, because I can. And now I'm not really doing much damage with knockoff, so I continue knocking off, and the Magnezone takes me out. Now really the only thing that can do a lot of damage to this +6 defense Magnezone is my Palkia. So I have to go into that, because Tapu Koko can't really touch this thing. So I go into Palkia. I don't want to mess around with this threat, I just go for Surf. My opponent lets me take it out. Then goes into Eternatus, which is Boots, as we can see. But it's faster than me, probably, and I don't want to die to a Dynamax Cannon. But I'm pretty sure Dynamax Cannon is coming out, so I switch into one of my fairies. I choose Zacian. And again, this Eternatus is a real big problem for my team. So I go straight for Psychic Fangs. I'm not messing around. My opponent predicts something like that and goes into Necrozma, which also happens to be boots. And I'm like, okay, I need to get out of here because I'm choice banded. And again, the only thing I have to really touch this, well, I have Tapu Koko, Zamzameta. Well, if I want to sort of deal with this aggressively, I'm going to go into Palkia, and that's what I choose to do. So I switch into Palkia, as my opponent sets up Stealth Rocks, I believe, yeah. And now, the Fire Blast, or Hydro Pump, or something is, you know, sort of expected, so I expect my opponent to go into Eternatus, thinking I'm choiced into Fire Blast or something. So I just go for Spatial Rend. My opponent does switch into Eternatus. I go for Spatial Rend. It doesn't knock it out, it only does almost 80. But now I'm slower, so I need to get out of here. And my opponent thinks I could be Choice Scarfed. So he wants to get out of here too. So he goes into his Fairy type, and I go into mine. And we both choose our Zacian on a predicted Dragon move. So I know I'm max speed. I'm jolly. And I don't know if the Zacian is jolly. I'm a man, and I stay in, and I just go for Play Rough, trying to knock out this Zacian. My opponent switches into Necrozma, because he still has Necrozma, so that's good play by my opponent. But now, I do the same thing I did before, and I go into Palkia, I believe. Yeah. I go into Palkia, my opponent goes for Thunder Wave, which is annoying. And I start trying to spam Surf, but I get paralyzed once. I get paralyzed again. Now I don't get paralyzed, I think. And I get a Surf off. But now, knowing that either Eternatus is coming in or my opponent's going to Roost, I'm just going to go into Tapu Koko because it deals with this Yveltal. So my opponent, thinking I'm choice, goes into Eternatus. I go into Tapu Koko. And Tapu Koko is really weak, but it has a Life Orb. So I'm like, okay, I hope this takes it out with Dazzling Gleam. And it does. So, another big threat gone. My opponent goes into Zacian, and I don't have a Necrozma anymore. All I have is the Skarmory, but I want to keep it sturdy. And my opponent was nice enough to defog the rocks for me. So I think I sack my Palkia here, because it's paralyzed and pretty useless now. As my opponent goes for Swords Dance, and that's fine. Then goes for Close Combat. Takes me out. Then I go into Skarmory and I have Counter, because that's the type of Skarmory I like to run. I also have Helmet. And the Zacian goes down, but my Skarmory is almost dead. And my opponent goes into Calyrex Ice, and unlike Glastrier in OU, this thing gets Trick Room. So I expect this thing to go for Trick Room. And I go for Whirlwind, and Whirlwind has higher priority than Trick Room. So I actually just Whirlwind this thing away. It's kind of a funny looking turn. And I get the Yveltal, and the Yveltal just knocks me out, and nicely takes a bit more chip. So I go into Tapu Koko, because it deals really well with this Yveltal. My opponent doesn't have a great switch in. I go for Discharge. Yeah, I'm trying to paralyze things, because that seems to be a good thing that Tapu Koko could do. Calyrex Ice comes in. I go for Discharge. My opponent goes for Trick Room. I don't want to give it a boost, so I go hard into Zamzameta. And this is my somewhat physically defensive Zamzameta. I think I'm, like, jolly, but I am pretty fast. I think I'm faster than Marshadow. But I have a lot of defense EVs, too. So it just eats this up, and then I'm like, oh god, I'm gonna take another one and be really low. So I better rest off. So I go for rest, but that doesn't work because Electric Terrain is up, and I'm like, oh, crap. Yeah, I didn't think about that when I was making this team, but this is sort of a Nambo. So I'm like, I gotta change that. So I failed to get the rest off, but my opponent, wanting to really just sweep the rest of my team and not maybe get swept by a crunching Zacian, sets up Trick Room again to reset up Trick Room, which I think was maybe a mistake. So it looks like I go first because my opponent goes for Trick Room. I go for Crunch, which is also a mistake. Actually, no, here was correct because my opponent went for Trick Room. But if my opponent had attacked me, Revenge would have done more. If it's base 120. So now Trick Room's over and I'm faster, so I go for Rest, as my opponent resets up Trick Room to try and sweep my whole team. But my opponent can't break through this Zamazenta. I get Revenge and I knock this thing out. And now Necrozma only has Sunsteel Strike to hit me with, and that's not doing anything at all. And I just sort of stay in with Zamazenta, eventually go for some crunches, get defense drops, and win the game. So that was a good game to my opponent. This guy was like number 10 on the ladder. I was really surprised I won, and I realized a couple things after I made this team. One, Electric Terrain and Rest are a bad combination. Two, Zacian still messes me up if Necrozma gets trapped, so maybe I want to do something about that. And three, I get like 6-0'd by Calyrex. Like a Specs Calyrex outruns my whole team. I don't have a Choice Scarfer. And I have no Ghost Resist. So that's terrible building on my part. Again, this was like the first iteration of this team. So I need to make some changes. I'm just beating this Necrozma. It's continuing to hit me. I think eventually I get a rest off and my opponent just forfeits because he sort of sees the writing on the wall. Yeah. So I think after I get this rest off, yeah, my opponent forfeits. So now I'm gonna have to upgrade this team. This is how I kind of build teams. I try it out on the ladder and then I make changes. So I'll show you the updated team. So here's the updated team, or upgraded team. I was trying to say both of those at once. Still have a Life Orb Tapu Koko because that's what I'm trying to build around. Still have a Zacian, but I thought, you know what? Eternatus may be less of a problem. Play Rough is pretty good against that. I could use some priority, so I put on Quick Attack. But notice I don't have Close Combat, so like Ferrothorn's going to be a bit of a problem. I put a Shed Shell on Necrozma because I just got trapped. And I don't want this thing to get trapped, and really I don't care about putting Heavy Duty Boots on this mon because it's immune to Toxic Spikes, and it resists Stealth Rocks, and it's already super slow, so it doesn't care about Sticky Web. So unless a bunch of spikes go up, I don't really care about boots. So I decide Shed Shell. I know I had leftovers before, but I just think Shed Shell is probably better because Gothitelle is a really highly used mon on the high ladder, or at least in tournaments. And Gothitelle likes to trap things like Necrozma. In fact, I have a team with a Gothitelle that traps Necrozma, and then I try and sweep with a Zekrom, which I think I used in a previous video. So I also have a Choice Scarfer now, a Ditto. Ditto seemed great because setup could be scary and just a solid Choice Scarfer. I have a Spadef Yveltal. It's pretty fast, but I needed a Calyrex answer, and this is the best one. Like I said, every team needs a Yveltal, and that's kind of why I'm running Tapu Koko. So we got no Defog here. We have Defog on Tapu Koko, and I have a Knockoff and Foul Play. And then sort of the same Palkia. So this is sort of the second, this was a few days later when I had this next battle, and I'd kind of forgotten the team I just played against, the sets, which is gonna come into context, or whatever, words, because I'm gonna play the exact same team, but a different player. but another very good player. So I'll get to that battle in a second. So here's that second battle, and it's taken a few days after that first battle. And as you can see, my opponent has the same team. And also, my opponent is Mr. Jambad. So I think in my last video we had an imposter Jambad who is MVP Jam. This is actually one of Jambad's alts. The other one has a capital M. So I say good luck, have fun, Jam. It doesn't look like he says anything back, but if you look at his version of this, which he uploaded, he does say good luck, have fun. I don't know why it doesn't show up on mine. So I was just like, huh, maybe he's really dialed in, but just doing showdown things, I think. So I lead with Ditto, which was kind of a mistake. I was thinking I'm going to trap the Magnezone, but that probably wouldn't have worked out for me very well. So it was kind of a mistake. But I lead Ditto against Eternatus, and I get to see this Eternatus's set, which is Dynamax Cannon, Mystical Fire, Toxic, and Recover. But I know that my Ditto's health is going to be important, so I'm going to switch out to a Fairy type on this Dynamax Cannon. And I decided to go into Tapu Koko. It doesn't look that great at the moment, because my opponent has A, this Eternatus, and B, a Magnezone. But I figure it's a decent switch, and all this thing can hit me with is a Mystical Fire, and I guess a Toxic. So I go into Tapu Koko on the obvious Dynamax Cannon. And I have Discharge, so I'm going to try and fish for a Para, because if this thing is paralyzed, then a Veltal will outspeed it, and I can go for Taunt, and I can beat this thing. So that happens. I take a Mystical Fire, and that doesn't matter too much, because I'm just trying to get the paralysis. But now I'm like, this isn't working out. I'm going to go into Necrozma, and work from there. Let's see, and then I think I go for Stealth Rocks. Yeah, I go for Stealth Rocks because it's, Stealth Rocks. And at this moment, Jam's like, okay, I'm not going to go into Magnezone. I'm going to condition him to think I'm going to go into a Veltal and eventually trap him. But I'm Shed Shell because, like in the last game, I got trapped. So I'm not even thinking about that. So rocks go up. And I notice I kind of have a free turn, and I probably should have gone into Tapu Koko, but Zacian's kind of free here. And this thing is just so strong. Like, it's ridiculous. So my opponent, Jam, goes for Defog, and then the switch to Necrozma is so obvious. I go for Crunch, and I'm jolly. If I was Adamant Band, that would have been an easy 2-hit KO. And as is, I can kind of crit and defense drop Fish. So I do that, and that's not a crit, that's just a roll. I just did 54%, so crazy that this thing, even when jolly, can beat its supposed counter. So now Play Rough is looking pretty strong, especially if I get rid of this Magnezone. So Jam goes into his own Zacian, and I go into Tapu Koko as sort of a mid-ground, sacking it. This was probably a mistake, because Tapu Koko is actually going to be pretty good, or would have been pretty good later, to deal with this Yveltal, but at the moment I'm thinking my own Yveltal can handle Jam's Yveltal, and I guess it could have. But Jam pulls a double into Magnezone, trying to catch my Necrozma. And so this doesn't work out for me either, because I can't really touch this Magnezone. So I have to go into Palkia. And I didn't know this Magnezone carries Toxic. So now my Palkia, which is a big threat to my opponent's team, is Toxic, which is not good. But now the Hydro Pump or Fire Blast is sort of what I'm telegraphing here. And that's what Jam thought was coming, but I have neither of those moves because I don't like to miss. I hate missing Spatial Rend as it is. So I have Thunder, but that's for Kyogre when the rain's up, and that's 100% accurate in the rain. So the only move I have that usually misses is Spatial Rend, which is 95%. And now, since I'm telegraphing Fire Blast, I know Eternatus is coming in here, so I go for Spatial Rend, and Lustrous Orb boosted Spatial Rend takes out this Eternatus. So that's great. Then Jam goes into Zacian, and I gotta get out of here because I'm slower. So I get out of here. I sack Tapu Koko, which again is probably a mistake. So I get into my Necrozma for free. And I think I just set up rocks again. Or do I attack this thing? Yeah, I set up rocks again. Now the Magnezone's in. And again, this Magnezone is what's stopping my Zacian from really putting in the work. Or my Ditto from copying his Zacian and really putting in the work. So I'm going to just knock this thing off to try and get as much damage as I can. So it goes for Magnet Rise, because it's like max speed. I knock it off, and then I know Iron Defense is coming, because it's going to want to body press me to death. So I switch out to Palkia, because I'm Shed Shell. And now I'm in a pretty good spot. Palkia is toxic, so it's not the greatest spot. But this Magnezone kind of has to run now, because it's not really very good on the special defense side. And Jam goes into a Veltal, which I think you should have switched into this Palkia in the first place, because that Lustrous Orb boosted Surf does 0. So, but I sort of have a free switch, and I think I go into my own Veltal, right? Because I was hoping to be faster and taunt this thing down, but this Veltal is actually like jolly, like max speed. So I'm not faster, and I'm like, oh. And now I realize that Tapu Koko would have been better to keep, not this Veltal. So we exchange knockoffs. He predicts me to go into Zacian and goes into Magnezone, which is good play by him. But I'm going to go into Palkia on the oh no. So my thinking there was, I don't have close combat. I need to take down this Magnezone, so either Zacian or Ditto as Jam Zacian can sweep. So I just need to get damage on this Magnezone. So I go for Crunch. Now Jam, expecting close combat, which I don't have, goes into his own Zacian. And I think I get a defense fall. But this isn't good for me either, because I think I just sack a Veltal here. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. I kind of wanted to save Necrozma for this Calyrex Ice, which looks really scary. So I go into a Veltal sacking it, and Jam goes for Swords Dance, which is definitely a misplay, because he can't stay in now because Ditto's about to reverse sweep him. So he has to switch out. I go for Foul Play in case he's like sub or something. A Veltal takes a bit, I get a free switch into Zacian, and now I go for Play Rough. Just not over-predicting. I know the Magnezone's probably going to come out, but Veltal is kind of being an annoyance, and damage on Magnezone is just going to be good for later, because my plan is to trap the Magnezone with my Ditto and sort of take it out that way, because nothing else except for Palkia really takes it out very well. So I go for Play Rough. Magnezone comes in, and I miss. So that's sort of going to come up a little bit later. This Magnezone would be at considerably less health. It has a lot of defense EVs, but I'm Choice Banded and Zacian and, +1 because of my ability and stab, so it would have done decent damage. So, but now I gotta get out of here, and I really don't have a body press switch in. So I go into Palkia, because I need to scare this thing out. I take a lot from the body press. I go for Surf, because I'm trying to take out that Magnezone. Veltal comes in and takes 43. Now here's where I kind of forget the sets from a few days ago comes into play, because I forgot that this Veltal has Sucker Punch. I saw it in the last game. It Sucker Punched my Tapu Koko. But now I'm like, well, it probably doesn't have Sucker Punch, and if it does, he has to click it, and alright, I'm just gonna stay in and click Surf. Kinda stupidly, and Jam, expecting me to be smart, goes for Roost, expecting me to switch. But I'm not smart, so I go for Surf, and it's a double down, because Toxic takes me out. So on the double down, my Necrozma beats 2 of the last 3, and I really want damage on the Magnezone, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go into my own Necrozma. As Jam goes into Zacian, and obviously this is great for me, I don't mess around with threats here, and I just go straight for the Sunsteel Strike, and I get more chip on this Magnezone. And now, I know this Necrozma is great against the last 2, so I want to get out of here, and so my plan, of course, is to trap this thing with Ditto. But I can't really switch Ditto in, and if Veltal's not looking so useful, it kind of loses to Zacian and the Magnezone, so I just kind of sack it here. Oh no, first I get Rocks, right, because Rocks are always good. I sack a Veltal here. I go for Taunt, so this thing can't keep setting up, because it could probably beat my Ditto, maybe, if it could keep setting up. And the Magnezone's now at 53. It'd be at a lot less if it had taken that Play Rough. So I go into Ditto, and this has been my plan since the start of the game. And the Magnezone here, I know the set now. It has about 140 HP, maybe like a little bit more, maybe like 150. But I have like 300 HP because I'm at full health. So I'm sure I win this exchange, almost certainly. It's also taunted, so it can only go for Body Press. So I'm pretty sure I win this exchange regardless. But I get a crit and I just knock it out. But, you know, I missed the Play Rough earlier. I'm pretty sure I was going to win this exchange anyways. So I don't think it matters that much. The Zacian comes in, and now I think that I'd like to get my Ditto back as Jam Zacian, because then I'm going to be a +2 Zacian. So I sack my own Zacian, which is only a +1 Zacian, although it is banded. But it's not scarfed. And now I figure, well, I'm Jolly Max Speed. I don't know if my opponent is. I'm just going to go straight for Play Rough here. Kind of like I did in the last game. I'm just like, you know, risk it for the biscuit. And even if I lose the speed tie, I get Ditto. That's not a speed tie. And I have a +2 Scarf Zacian. So Jam doesn't win the speed tie. So now this Calyrex comes out. And again, if he had won the speed tie and knocked me out, this would be a +2 Zacian that, well, it would have been a Ditto as a +2 Zacian. Ditto is confusing. Instead, I just have a +1 Zacian against this Calyrex. And I get some chip off. Does a lot, but not enough. And then Calyrex takes me out. And then I'm sure I probably live anything, but it goes for Throat Chop. That was a bit close, but I take it out with the Sunsteel Strike because, you know, I had enough HP. And you see Ditto didn't even come back in the game. So I said, good game to Jam. He says good game to me, but it doesn't show up here because doing Showdown things. But yeah, I just wanted to share these 2 replays because I thought they were against, 1, they were against good players, and 2, they were pretty good games. It's kind of strange that my opponents had the exact same team. I don't know where they got this team. I'd like to know. But my switch of Necrozma to Shed Shell was, I guess, a good play. I think I'm going to work on this team a little bit more and then do a live with it. But that'll be coming soon. Alright, well, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and I hope everyone has a good day.